Good afternoon all. My name is Oliver. I'll be hosting the webinar this afternoon. As you have probably already seen, and as you can see on your screen, big focus is what happens when your PMO gets AI team members, obviously in the big emphasis on AI over the last sort of 12 to 24 months. Kind of how exactly does that affect your day-to-day activities within a PMO team? So quick emphasis on our side. Who exactly are we? So we're CPS, formerly sort of Corporate Project Solutions. We are a Microsoft partner. We're around 30 years of experience, sort of founded in and around 1995. At one stage, we were focused almost exclusively on PPM, so focusing quite heavily on Microsoft Project and the various different iterations it's been. In more recent years, in kind of the advent of Office 365, we have looked to kind of expand our repertoire across the Microsoft stack, particularly conscious, obviously, how much project feeds into kind of everything and anything now, so Power BI, Dynamics, etc. In more recent times, we've had quite a big emphasis on AI, and particularly, obviously, in the Microsoft space, Copilot, where we are sort of spending an awful lot of time kind of developing out Copilot capabilities for organizations and supporting building of agents.
Nice.
Apologies if we could just make sure everyone's on mute for the moment. From there, we've been recognized quite highly by Microsoft as one of their partner of the years in the Copilot and agent space. I guess at that moment, I'll take an opportunity. Sam, I don't know if you want to jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. So good morning, everybody. So yeah, my name's Sam Graber. I am CTO here at CPS. I've been in and around CPS for about 15 years now, starting life as a project and program management consultant. So actually deploying PPM toolsets to a number of organizations. And actually, there's a number of people on the call today that I kind of know and I think have worked with previously. So lovely to see you all. So I'll be running through the webinar today. I've got, I don't know, 7-8 slides. I don't have too many, so enough to fill us through to around 25 to, leaving 10 minutes or so for questions. I guess, Ollie, if you just want to jump onto the next slide, you're going to have to move slides for me, I'm afraid, just because because of the slight Wi-Fi issues I've been having. A bit of a scene setter. So this webinar, I guess, has come about, and this webinar series has come about because most people are now on modern PPM platforms. So they're on platforms where the data is easily accessible, which hasn't always been the case, particularly those people who have come from more legacy Microsoft systems, such as Project Online, where the data is a little bit harder to get at, or potentially even on-premise server solutions such as Project Server. I think that, alongside the rapid adoption of AI across all businesses, this is a conversation we're having a lot with our customers in terms of what they can do next with their PPM solution, specifically around the agentic solutions that solve the business problems that they're having. AI is everywhere. It's impossible to miss. I think we're all using it day to day. So whether that's Copilot Chat, Microsoft 365 Copilot, or the plethora of other AI offerings that exist in the market, it's being used everywhere. I use it daily. I've used it in this presentation to turn my horrible, wordy, bullet-pointed slides into something slightly nicer to look at. So we're all using AI all the time. But this session really is focused on what we can do next. So when people hear the term AI team members, I think everyone thinks, or just AI, everybody thinks about, I guess, the chatbots, so the AI chat that we're using, the personal assistants. But really what I want to explore with you all today is what happens when PMOs and I guess project delivery actually start gaining AI agents, as opposed to just having AI assistants or personal assistants that we're using to make our lives easier in terms of helping us write an email, helping us review a document, etc. So that's the subject that we're going to cover today. I generally like to start and finish webinars with a bit of a quote. So the one that I pulled together for today is: every PMO has more data than ever before. The winners will be the organizations that can convert that insight into action the fastest. So with that in mind, Ollie, if you want to jump through to the next slide, and we'll get cracking. It's not. Have you moved forward, Ollie?
I have. I'm guessing I think we've just got the poll come up.
Okay, cool, fantastic. So before we get started, there are a couple of different polls that we're asking today. This is really just to help me set the scene a little bit with the content of some of these. So the first poll is around what PPM tool are you using today. So this will be a poll that will pop up in Teams very shortly. We'll leave it up for literally 30 seconds. Please do interact. Please do jump in there. Let us know what tool you're using today. The beauty of the subject we're talking today is actually a lot of what we can do across any tool and any platform, but it'd be really good just to understand what PPM tools you are currently using today. Excellent. So I can't see, because I'm dialed in the mobile, unfortunately, I can't see the results of that poll. But Ollie, if you could just read a couple out, that'd be really helpful.
So I think we've got a big emphasis on Planner Premium. There's a couple of other ones that are sort of dotting about. So some familiar ones like Project Online, Power Platform, Planner NMS, Project for the Web. A few in there: Excel, MS Planner, Keyed In, Copilot, and Gemini.
Okay, cool. Fantastic. So a lot of Microsoft-based stuff. I think those of you who are on Project Online, hopefully you're in the process of moving away from that platform. So it hopefully won't come as a surprise to you that that platform is going end of life from Microsoft at the end of September. So about 6 weeks away. So hopefully you're well on the way to looking at the a way off that platform and into something else. If you're not, please do reach out and we can have a conversation with you. Fantastic. Okay, so a lot of Microsoft focus, a lot of people using Planner, a lot of people with data in Dataverse, which is exactly what we're seeing, and a lot of the content that we'll be running through will be very relevant. So next slide, please, Ollie. Okay, so a PMO, don't want to teach you all to suck eggs, but a PMO is there to support decision making. That's one of the things that it's supposed to be doing today. But actually, it's one of the things it's possibly not doing in a number of cases. What we're finding is that a lot of the PMO capacity is actually being consumed by coordination, pulling things together, chasing people, gathering information, as opposed to supporting decision making. So there's an awful lot of manual workarounds that are going on within organizations. So at the moment, the human effort that's being spent is around, say, tracing updates, producing reports, hopefully producing reports that are automated from a PPM tool that you've got at the moment. But I know a number of organizations are still producing reports manually and having to pull those together in Excel or PowerPoint or whatever other reporting tools you might choose. They're manually conducting risk reviews. They're doing a lot of manual governance in terms of chasing updates and chasing timesheets and making sure that people are following the right processes and manually checking that the right things have been done to pass from one stage gate to another, and spending a huge amount of time gathering information for meetings, whether they're project-based meetings, program-based meetings, or any other reviews that might be going on. When in reality, the activities that we really want our PMOs to be doing is supporting the business with strategic planning, being able to support easily with scenario modeling. So what happens if we, stop these projects or add these 5 projects in or put these resources in a different area? Optimizing our portfolio to make sure it's delivering the right benefits and we're getting the ROI from the projects that we want to. Meaningfully engaging stakeholders. So not just engaging stakeholders in terms of passing them a report or emailing them a report at the end of the month or chasing a stakeholder for a particular input or update, but actual meaningful stakeholder engagement. And actually doing some real benefits realization to actually make sure that we are getting the benefits we're expecting from the projects and programs that we're delivering. Quite often, projects close, nobody even actually checks in to see whether over time it's delivering on the benefits we want to. So what we're seeing is the right-hand side is what we want our PMOs to be doing. On the left-hand side, actually what our PMOs are doing at the moment, even with some automation in PPM tools, they're spending a huge amount of effort today doing coordination as opposed to decision support. Next slide, please, Ollie. So before you get cracking, I guess, with any thought around, okay, how can we add, an AI team member or an AI agent? So when I talk about team members, I guess I'm talking about agents in particular. One of the questions that I think any PMO leaders should be asking themselves are, how trusted is the data? And we'll come on to this a little bit later as to where to start with this. So how trusted is your data? Do you trust your data? Is it in a good place? If you were to automate any reporting, any activity, do you trust your data well enough that you'll allow an AI agent to do that on your behalf? Where are you seeing the most wasted effort within your PMO at the moment? Where are there being decisions delayed? So where do you see things taking the longest to appear before anything else can happen? Do you see at certain points within a project or a program or within a particular sign-off route that there's always a delay and it's always in the same place? So where are those decisions? What governance have you got that's currently being carried out, not just by the PMO, but by project managers, may even be pre-project or post-project? What governance have you got that actually can be augmented? So which things can you automate? Are there really manual steps at the moment that in reality, you could build an agent to do for you? It's one of the things we're looking at internally. And then what capabilities do you need within your PMO next? So this is a really important thing to sit down and have a think about before you even think about looking at AI team members or AI agents to come into your parts of the business. So with that in mind, I've got another quick poll. Of those challenges that we just shared with you, so the challenges around wasted effort, how trusted your data is, what decisions are being delayed, and what governance can be augmented, which one of those is the biggest problem that you're seeing right now? And hopefully you should see a poll pop up around that.
Poll should have just come up for people.
So again, we'll give it just 30 seconds or so for people to drop the answer in. Ollie, if you could just keep us posted on what's coming through. I'm still
on about 40 responses so far.
Fantastic. Thank you for the engagement, everyone. It makes it that much easier. I would rather select all on this poll. That's I think that's fair. I was chatting to a customer last week actually, and we were talking about these things, and he said to me, "Where do you want me to start, and how long do you have?" And I think every pain point touched every single one of these, which was interesting for sure. Do we have a clear winner, Ollie, or?
It's a relatively even split. So I think the highest is wasted PMO effort. So kind of 33%. 33% delayed decisions and governance are relatively even, 26% and 24%, and untrustworthy data comes in at 15%.
Fantastic.
Although I think the select all on this poll has got a rather positive response as well, I think, within the chat.
Okay, I can imagine. I think there's some of these things that are very obvious. So you can see where there's wasted effort because you hear it. You hear people saying, "Oh, I'm having to spend a huge amount of time to do this," or "I'm constantly having to chase this person for X or Y." You can see where decisions are causing delays. But it's not always the case, but quite often larger organizations have longer decision cycles than smaller, more agile ones. It's not always the case, but it can very much be that. So you see that. In terms of how trusted your data is, most people do trust their data. They don't know if they should be trusting their data, but they trust it because they don't know otherwise. And I think that's one of the things that can come out very quickly is that you think your data is really good until you start to put some automation in place, and then you realize very quickly that it's not. I remember working with a large public sector customer very early on in my career, put in a PPM tool. I was actually called back in about 3 months later saying the system didn't work. So we sat down with the senior stakeholders, we ran through the system, we added data into all the relevant areas, automated the reporting, and the reporting came out the other end. And the stakeholder looked at me and said, "Well, Sam, it does work." I said, it does work. And he said, "Well, how come all these reports are giving me this information?" And I said, "Well, because the data is really poor." And we ended up then spending quite a bit of time working with that customer on more on their kind of their process and governance to actually bring the data up to speed, because a lot of people were blaming the system, saying the system didn't work, but in reality, the system was fine, but the data behind it was not. So just in a pop-up there that says assurance. Absolutely. And I've got a slide later which talks about what happens if you start to put kind of AI agents on top of poor data. Fantastic. Ollie, next, I think next slide will be a poll, but we'll move on to the next one. So next slide. So what does the shift look like from AI assisted or the shift to AI assisted delivery support? Ollie, next, if you got them. Fantastic. So I think the left-hand side here, we're all very comfortable with, or we're getting more comfortable with, I think it's fair to say, in terms of traditional AI, if there is such thing as traditional AI, because it's still very new. So we're all pretty much, whether it's work life or personal life, we're using AI to, respond to prompts. It allows us to generate content. It allows us to answer questions. In essence, you ask it, and AI responds. And I use it all day, every day in work, and I use it all day, every day at home as well. In fact, it's almost got me a little bit lazy now in that I won't go and look for an answer. I will just open up an app on my phone and ask AI. What we actually want to move to, and what a lot of organizations are wanting to move to, is more of an agentic AI approach. So this is an agent, or a team member, however we want to word it, that's running in the background that actually watches processes for you. It understands the context of which it's working in. It actually starts to recommend actions on your behalf based on what it's been watching and the context behind them. It can carry out approved tasks for us. So if certain things and certain metrics or situations are met, then it can automate. So if you think about moving from one stage gate to another, if it can evidence that certain things have been done, certain documents have gone in and they've been approved, we might even automate that approval process as well, then actually it could carry out the move from a design phase to a build phase on a project if we want to. It escalates exceptions for us on our behalf. So again, talking to a customer a couple of weeks ago who wanted to be able to come in a Monday morning and have an agent tell him everything that's gone on kind of over the weekend or in the past week across the portfolio. So it observes, it analyzes, it recommends, and it can act on our behalf. So it does much more than you prompt and it delivers. It's actually doing things in the background for you all the time. So an example of that, instead of creating a report, an agent could collect your data, it could identify the issues, it could draft the insights, it could suggest interventions before a PM has even looked at that dashboard and opened that dashboard as part of a reporting cycle. So taking that a step further, if you could just move on to the next slide, please, Ollie. What could an agentic PMO look like? So there's a number of different agents that would form an agentic PMO, particularly in my head. So I don't believe that we just have a single agent. I think we have a group of agents that are working that form this agentic PMO. So it would augment PMO teams to enhance the capacity that are already there, to allow people to focus on strategy and judgment and some more of the value add activities. And the kind of agentic PMO agents that certainly we're hearing from customers and people such as yourselves are, a risk agent. So something that's continually in the background, monitoring the risk logs, monitoring what's happening on projects, how they're transitioning, how they're profiling, so it can identify and assess risks and warn you when it thinks a particular risk is about to become an issue, or warn you when a particular project is going down a path where traditionally when projects have gone down that path, these 5 things have happened. So it's in the background working all the time, analyzing the risks that are there. It can look at meeting transcripts. It can look at emails that are coming in from customers or partners or stakeholders. It can look against kind of specifications or statements of work or work orders, depending on the environment that you're working in, and actually start to predict what we think some of those risks could be on that project as it starts to evolve. We can do something very similar around resources, so having a resource agent, so something that's in the background looking to optimize capacity and resource allocation to save you having to manually do some of the simple elements of that. I know that's a very complex subject and one of the last things that people try to automate, but it can be done. A benefits agent that's actually tracking benefit realization and outcomes. So it's not just a benefit logged in a benefit log that never ever gets looked again post project completion. It's actually an agent in the background that's continuously checking and prompting and asking people, has this benefit been realized yet? If it has, what was the value? So it can go back and compare that against what the original business case looked like. Governance agent, stop all the running around having to chase various updates and timesheets and everything else that goes with it, as long with the governance that the project is going through. So stage gates is one of the examples that I mentioned earlier. And then just a portfolio agent. I say just, that bigger portfolio agent that's constantly monitoring the health of the project and as I say, letting you know what's going on in the portfolio over a period of time. Value of all that, we end up with faster insights. We see risks and issues that are surfaced much earlier. We see a much better performance of the continuous monitoring instead of the periodic review of what happened last month or last week. It's actually monitoring all the time, telling you what it think might happen in the future. Reporting is fantastic and we should continue to do it, but it's very much retrospective as opposed to forward look. Hopefully it's going to give us greatest productivity, so the teams that we've got, the PMO experts that we've got in the room, can spend more time with the data that they're being given and actually do something with it, as opposed to spending a huge amount of the time just chasing the data themselves. And fingers crossed it will give us better outcomes on our projects, programs and portfolios as well. In terms of what that might look like, so next slide please. In terms of a day in the life, just a similar spin on this. So as I said, less administration, much more leadership. So today we might spend a huge amount of time looking at RAID logs and status packs and project reports and all our calendar meetings, looking at dashboards, having a look at all the email updates and having to pull that together to pull some kind of pack ready for a program or portfolio view with a wider stakeholder group. Hopefully with an agentic PMO, and actually that top report is something that a lot of you will be doing with your PPM tools at the moment, in that you'll be able to automate your portfolio overview. But wouldn't it be fantastic if it could actually then start to, offer you some advice or some thoughts on the back of it, in terms of, flagging what it believes the priorities are based on all the information that it's got, what it believes the risks might be, actually drafting you some of those summaries and some of those emails and emailing them across to stakeholders in advance, and suggesting, what your next actions might be. I watched a really interesting demo from Microsoft around this, and it was geared around sales professionals as opposed to PMOs. But the whole idea was that there was a group of individuals who had to produce kind of pipeline reports and send them to their boss on a regular basis. And what they actually did with this organization was build an agent that did it on their behalf, analyze the data on a Friday afternoon after the entire week's work has gone, and then emailed the boss with exactly what was happening, what the prediction is, what the pipeline looks like, and what the forecast will be. So it took a whole element of administration away from that sales team, who were then able to spend much more time selling as opposed to providing updates to the business. So before I move on to kind of where to start and what you can do to maybe start to bring some of this into action, I've just got one more poll just to ask, and that's where you are currently on your AI journey. So again, work cloud based, I believe. So what I mean by this is, are you using AI in work at all at the moment? Are you just starting out? Are you using, say, Microsoft 365 Copilot? Are you using other AI tools? Are you doing nothing at all? Are you actually quite a long way down the line in that you are using M365 Copilot and you're actually starting to pilot some agents? Because I know a number of organizations are. So yeah, just a word cloud to see where we are and where various people are on that AI journey. I know it very much depends on, with a lot of cases, the organizations that you're in, the nature of them, the governance around it, etc. But I think be really interesting to see. Any interesting trends coming out, Ollie?
Just waiting for the responses to filter through now. I think Copilot seems to be getting, so we've got Copilot Chat, Agents, Gemini. I think quite a big emphasis on Copilot, some ChatGPT.
Fantastic.
Early on experimenting.
That's a key. I'm hearing that one a lot, experiment a lot. And a lot of people are experimenting with Copilot because it sits so nicely within the Microsoft ecosystem that we're all pretty much operating in most of the time, which is good. It's secure. We know what it's doing. But I also know there's a number of people who aren't doing anything at all yet, which is difficult, because a lot of us in our personal lives are, and we have, and I heard Gemini mentioned earlier, but we have Gemini or Claude or whatever it might be installed on our smartphones that we use, and then we come to work and we can't use any of it. It actually feels like a massive step back, which is something that I guess leaders need to think about. If they're not embracing AI, it can feel a little bit behind the times at times. Okay, so in terms of where to start, so you can skip past the next slide, Ollie, because it just says where to start. So there's a couple of things that, and I've just got 2 slides on this, and there's a couple of things, and these are really, really important. So if you recognize some of the problems that we spoke about earlier, if you see some of the benefits of what an AI team member or an AI agent could bring to your PMO, it's a couple of key things that it's important that you look at. So the first thing is you have to start with strong foundations. And the nice thing about talking to people, particularly in a project and program management and PMO space, is they understand the importance of foundations and governance and everything else that goes with it. But This is really, really important when it comes to putting in AI, because AI accelerates what already exists. Okay, it's not a silver bullet. It won't solve every single problem. For example, if you have poor data, if you have weak governance, if you have inconsistent processes, and if you have a low adoption of the current PPM tool you're using, all you're going to do is accelerate or magnify the issue that's there. So poor data with AI will give you confusion. Weak governance with AI will give you a huge amount of risk that needs to be looked at. Inconsistent processes will, of course, give you inconsistency. And if you've got low adoption, you'll be spending time, money, and effort building out AI solutions, and they just won't give you the value at all. So all you really do is scale the problems that you've got. If you focus on that middle space on data, governance, process, and people and change, so these are the 4 key pillars of any piece of change. It doesn't matter what tool you're putting in, what change you're putting into an organization. The data is maybe slightly less relevant if you're not putting in a technical tool, but is still valid. But that whole governance process and people and change are really key. But if we get it right, and we focus to make sure all those things are in place before we even think about putting AI in place, you'll find with strong foundations that with good data, you're going to get a huge amount of clarity, and you're going to get it much faster. So you'll be able to get decisions. You'll be able to get it to predict. I say predict, automate what's going to happen, what we think is going to happen, but automate routine tasks, which is a massive time win. If you have strong governance, then you're going to trust what's coming out the back of it. If you have really clear standardized processes, then they'll be consistent, and that this AI agent will be used in a consistent way across the organization. And if you have a high adoption rate, then the impact's going to be huge. So before you do anything, it is worth just making sure that whatever element of a PMO process or whatever activity you're looking to automate, just make sure you think about the data, process, governance, and people and change elements. And it sounds big and grand, and it doesn't have to be, but just make sure those things are in place before you do anything else. Assuming they are, and Noel, if you want to move on to the next slide, the key here is to prove value quickly, particularly if these things are costing you money. You want to prove value to whoever it is that's signing off the budget to do these things, and then you want to scale safely. So you don't want to do too much too soon. There's a saying that I use all the time: you don't want to boil the ocean. We talked about a number of pain points earlier on in some slides, but we really need to make sure that we're doing things properly. And to do that, it's with a fairly simple 5-stage process. So the first thing is to assess what's going on in your organization at the moment. So what is your current maturity? More importantly, where are the pain points? Anything we're doing around this, we should be solving business problems. We should be solving pain points within the organization. If you can't pinpoint what you're trying to resolve or the issue that it's going to help, we have to ask ourselves why we're doing it. So, sit down with end users, groups of end users, run a series of workshops. I think we can talk to you about some things we've done with customers before to really pull out what those key business cases and use cases are. Prioritize 2 or 3 of those, no more. It's a really hard thing to do, but try and prioritize 2 or 3 of those really high value use cases. So these might be the ones that save you the most time. They may save you the most money. They may just be really high profile in terms of actually the end user of this agent that you're going to put in place is someone incredibly senior. And if you wow them, then it's incredibly likely that they're going to sign off for you to do more. So prioritize those high value use cases. Make sure we prepare properly, make sure your data, process, and governance foundations are in place. Not necessarily for everything at this point. This is kind of proof of concept stuff, but for the use cases you are prioritizing, make sure you have that data, process, and governance. So one of the things you might do in that prioritization process, if you're really strong on risk and issue management, then actually put risk and issue management as one of those high priority items, because that your data, process, and governance foundations for that element is really strong. So whilst it might not deliver you the biggest, sound like an American now, bang for your buck, your data is in a good place for that, so you can trust it. So therefore make that one of your high priority use cases. Pilot it. So with an agent or a co-pilot enabled automation process. So again, we're moving away from just saying, let's use a AI chat function for this. We're actually talking about automating a process, taking a step away, automating an action that somebody would be carrying out, or having an agent working in the background, continually processing and popping up alerts to people. Another scenario I was talking about with a commercial customer the other day is who does a lot of work on statements of work and building out solutions with customers. They wanted to have an agent running in the background that's continuously looking at meeting transcripts and emails, but comparing it back to the statement of work and what they agreed to do, so that it's automating and quickly alerting PM. So it's a PM assistant to some extent, and say, hey, it looks like this customer's starting to talk about data migration. Just a reminder, data migration is out of scope. But what I'm seeing is a lot of conversations in meetings, transcripts around the customer. Sounds like they're expecting you to do migration. You might want to jump on this fairly quickly. Which is a really cool use of a kind of an agent that's running in the background. Once you've done that pilot, if that's working, we then need to we then scale it. So we scale it across beyond that initial pilot user group, across to the rest of the business, and we start the process again. And this is the way to start to build out and start to build in kind of those agents and that automation. I wouldn't recommend and would never recommend trying to do everything at the same time. You have to do it with this scaled model where you build things out slowly. You prove the concept works. You get some buy-in, and then you move on to the next one. Excellent. I think that's it from me on slides. I'm not sure where we're at with questions, Ollie, but we do have around 10 minutes left before we've got a kind of closing slide. So let's just have a look where we're at with questions.
I was about to say, I can see one question currently in the Q&A element. If anyone has any additional questions as well, either in the Q&A, ideally in the Q&A, so we can just definitely make sure we're not missing them, or in the chat function. So we have one, which is where we are talking about agentic AI, what sort of tools are we talking about? Copilot agents, I assume in Microsoft world, but are your organization's ICT information management, information security, anywhere near considering allowing this? Because ours is very risk averse and potentially with recent issues with fair reason. Is this the same elsewhere? The known change of Copilot agents being allowed in the short to medium term?
Good question, and one that's really important. One of the things we're spending a lot of time with customers about is, and as Ollie mentioned earlier, because we work across the Microsoft stack, we do a lot of work in the security, compliance, identity spaces with customers to make sure that this stuff is safe and secure before we use it. In terms of tools and technologies, we're a Microsoft house. There's no doubt about that. So we are very much talking about using the Microsoft tool set to build out these agents. So it's Copilot, it's Copilot Studio, it's building out agents in Azure if we need to, with dev work. The beauty around using Copilot is it's very much what's the word I'm looking for? It's embedded into your organization. So you are it only looks at data that exists within your tenant. You can control exactly what data it looks at, who can access that data, and where it can go. The second you start using anything outside of that, which we see customers who will be, inadvertently pasting data, private IP type data from internal documents into ChatGPT, where you kind of had shadow IT because they've got it on an app, and before you know it, you're actually starting to, share data outside of your immediate Microsoft domain, and at that point you kind of lose control of where it goes. So we're very much talking about Copilot. We're very much talking about utilizing Microsoft technologies to do this. We know where the data is grounded. We know where it's going, and we very much work on that first before we build anything out. A number of organizations aren't there yet, so there are a lot of conversations to have with information security type folks within organizations to make sure that they're comfortable. But if you do it right, as long as the foundations are right, and you build these things in the right way, then you can be quite safe and secure as to where that data is and what's being used. And that's why we very much focus on the Microsoft technology stack, because let's say Copilot and all the functionality that goes around it is grounded within your tenant, your data, your organization, and Microsoft do not use that data to train their models, and it doesn't go anywhere, which is really important. But that is the danger of not adopting AI fast enough, is that people will start to use shadow IT and shadow AI tools, and at that point you can't get data leakage, which is really important.
Yeah, we've got a couple more coming through now. How have you seen AI enhance resource management processes across both forecasting for upcoming projects as well as managing in-flight time management?
Yeah, so the forecasting for upcoming projects is easier if your data's good. So your it depends how you're doing your resource management at the moment, whether you're using kind of overarching resource plans, where you kind of say, look, I need a project manager and a business analyst and a software engineer for 3/4 of their time over, the next 6 months. At that point, you're able to, take that data along with any projects that you have in your pipeline, and you're able to kind of assess that data against what's in flight versus what's coming. And that's actually a much easier in terms of I say easier, it's one of the hardest things to do, but in terms of forecasting, because you're in control of the data and you're actually saying, well, it's the data we've put into the project plans or the overarching resource plans that say, we need these individuals over this period of time. So that bit's a bit easier. The harder bit is around and I assume what you might mean, but if you don't, please let me know. I'm happy to pick up a separate conversation around this. But if we're talking about in-flight projects, if you're talking about kind of almost being able to model the in-flight projects you currently have, to say, right, well, I've got these 75 projects going across the business. This is the complete aggregated resource demand for those 75 people. I want to press a button and it tell me beautifully exactly how we can deliver these over the with the people we've got, and move projects around to the left or to the right and smooth them out to make sure that we have no resource peaks, etc. That's possible. The hardest part of that process is actually writing the rules into that agent so it knows which projects to prioritize over another. But actually, more importantly, within a project, which tasks are therefore more important than another. Because it might be you have a priority 1 project and a priority 2 project. It's quite easy at that point to build an agent that says, right, go and smooth the resource profile on these 2 projects. And, project 1 is a higher priority than project 2. But actually, project 1 might have some float on its critical path that project 2 doesn't. So therefore, we could actually delay a little bit of project 1 without impacting the overall end date, and then therefore move some projects onto project 2 for a period of time, which in reality means we're prioritizing project 2 over project 1. And trying to write that business rule into an agent is really hard. Now, if you can write that down and you can tell the agent all of those different scenarios, then it's possible. But actually, that use case is a tricky one to solve. It's quite a long-winded answer, but hopefully answers your question. But more than happy to have further conversations about it, because actually the resource management element for me is one of the most exciting and hardest bits to try and crack with this.
The next one we've got is, based on your discussions with clients so far, what do you think is the lowest hanging fruit for using AI to manage projects better, apart from governance, which is the one I think most are using it for?
Yeah, so governance, so risk management is one we're seeing a lot of appetite for, where people who have got a big database of previous risks that have happened on projects, they've got a database of lessons learned. What they're using it a lot for now is project initiation, and actually being able to initiate a brand new project and it come back and say, okay, well, based on experience, these are the risks that we believe exist on this project. So that's the big one. So the kind of the automating of tasks, the automation of governance, absolutely. The predictive analytics around risk management is the one that we're seeing a huge amount of traction with at the moment.
How accurate and consistent is the output from AI agents? Is it variable like Copilot?
So it's grounded on your data, I think, is fundamentally. So it's as accurate as your data is. So when you build out an agent, you point it at a data source. Now, if you point it at a data, let's say you're using Planner Premium as an example, all your data sits in Dataverse. Now, if you can sit there and say everything within the risk elements across all the projects and programs that sit in my Planner Premium instance is accurate, and you're only pointing it at that data, and you're not pointing it at anything else, you're not asking it to go anywhere else, and you're just pointing it at that data, and you put the right guardrails in place when you build the agent, you can be quite confident around what comes out. If you're allowing it to go and make up its own answers, or take the answers it's got and building out on them a little bit, then less so. But if you ground it right and you put the right guardrails in place and you tell it you only want it to bring back kind of what's in there, make no assumptions, etc., then at that point you're just automating against the data you already have. I think one of the things with some of the tools we've got there, and I had it last night, I was using Gemini for something, and I asked it a question, it gave me an answer, and I said, I think you're lying. Go away and have a look again. And it came back and it said, oh, actually, no, you're right. I got it wrong in the first place. Right. But at that point, I'm using a tool that's just looking at the web. Whereas if it's looking at your data and you're telling it not to go anywhere else, then you can trust the outputs that are coming out, assuming you trust your data.
Then next one, we've got a big problem in resourcing is effort when a task that is scheduled for 5 days clocks up 35 hours of effort for that resource when actually it's only a 5-hour task but spread over the 5 days. When effort isn't used correctly, it's very tricky. What would you recommend?
That's a counter one. Can you read that one out again? Sorry, just trying to...
A big problem in resourcing is effort when a task that is scheduled for 5 days clocks up 35 hours of effort for that resource when actually it's only a 5-hour task but spread over the 5 days.
Right.
When effort isn't, yeah, go for it.
Yes. So I think that comes down to, and I'm guessing we're probably talking to a user who's using Microsoft Project here, and when you schedule a task, whether you've got it set at kind of fixed work, fixed duration, fixed units, etc. in the desktop client. I think, as you say, the default is you assign a resource full time to a task over 5 days, and it'll tell you it's a whatever it was, 35, 37, 40 hours, because it's an entire week's worth of work. You need to make sure that I guess when you're planning that, you're planning it at the right level. So you're telling it it's a fixed work piece of task, fixed work activity. So it's 5 hours or 5 days, whatever you want, 5 hours worth of work over the course of a week. And if that task then turns into 2 weeks or 3 weeks, still 5 hours, but it's over the course of a week. I think if you don't have those settings in place correctly, it calculates everything at 100%. It assumes everybody's full time. So it comes down to making sure that your creation of those tasks is using the right settings at the right time.
And I think final one currently in the Q&A tab is, have you any cost benefit analysis? As a source of concern for my org is the cost of running agents, which is hard to estimate as it depends on the task and how many users are using it.
Yeah, so there's a number of calculators out there, both on the Microsoft website. We've actually got some on our website as well, that we can share. I think which will give you an idea of like cost of running agents. The cost benefit piece will be, I guess, depending on what your current cost of doing that activity is manually or in-house. So how many people you've got doing it, etc. So I think we can predict what the cost of running the agent will be. But to do the full cost benefit analysis, you would need to understand exactly how long that current activity is taking you, so you can run that comparison. But yeah, I agree. There are significant costs at times involved with building out some of these agents, which is important that you build them out right, so they're doing the minimum amount of work they need to do to give you the output you need, and you don't have something running in the background that's costing you tens of thousands of pounds when it can actually just cost you a few pounds. And I believe very much case by case specific, that one.
Yeah, I believe that's currently the end of the questions on both tabs as it stands. Unless there's anything further from anyone, I appreciate we are running slightly over at this stage.
We are, apologies.
I guess if that is the end of questions, I guess potentially just leads us on to sort of the final sort of closing out slides. Kind of where does it leave you, and where can CPS support kind of on your next steps? Again, as both Sam and I have kind of hinted, certainly what we can do is certainly help you on that journey, sort of that 1 to 5 steps, whether that's kind of just supporting you to understand kind of what the options are, both in kind of a more generic sense of what Microsoft offer, but also more in terms of specifically what would work for your organization, all the way through to assessing it and then helping you accelerate through on that particular, whether it's a specific agent or whether it's kind of a more broad approach to Copilot within your PMO, PPM team, kind of however you see fit. And I think that is actually the end of the slides, and I'm conscious again that we're running slightly over, but certainly if there are any more questions, if there is anything, obviously if you go away, have any further conversations with your teams internally, certainly Sam and I are here. I believe the team will be reaching out with, I think they've already said in the chat, with the webinar recording, as well as kind of just to gauge any feedback or if there's any specifics that you want to touch on after the session. I believe, Sam, we're probably going to be here for a couple minutes more, but in terms of the slides, that's probably everything. If there are any more questions for here and now, by all means, feel free to put them in the chat. More than happy to address. Otherwise, thank you all for attending, and yeah, I hope you have a great day.
Excellent, thanks, Ollie. And I'm more than happy to pick up any conversations with anybody outside of this who want to. I'm both very passionate about project and program management and AI, so I'm really keen and excited to talk to customers about this stuff if you'd like to. But thank you all for your time.